Wife left behind by Tycoon for Supermodel. Later finds out she's raising his secret trio inside the bookstore. She was wiping the floor near the poetry aisle when he walked in, Jaehoon Kong. Impeccably dressed, tall and composed, with an air that didn't match the quiet humility of the shop. He wasn't the type of man you'd expect in a place like that. He looked like he belonged in boardrooms or on the cover of magazines. And yet, there he was, staring curiously at a worn copy of Pablo Neruda's poems. Haejin approached him, her voice soft. "Can I help you find something?" she asked, brushing a strand of wet hair behind her ear. He looked up, and for a brief second he seemed lost. Not in the store, but in his own life. "I'm looking for something that feels real," he said. "Something that doesn't pretend." She blinked. It was such an odd answer, but she smiled gently. "Then you're in the right section." That was their beginning. No grand declarations, no extravagant gestures. Just shared silences and late conversations about literature and dreams in the back of the shop. Jaehoon started visiting often, so often that her co-workers began to tease her. But he never came with bodyguards or expensive suits. He wore simple coats, carried old books under his arm, and brought warm drinks when the air turned cold. He never told her who he really was. Not at first. To her, he was just Jaehoon, the quiet man who recited poetry and smiled as if the world was too heavy for him. She didn't know he was the only heir to a sprawling corporate empire, or that he lived in a penthouse guarded by security and expectations. But maybe that was why he kept coming back. With Haejin, he didn't have to wear a mask. And Haejin, she was unlike anyone he had ever met. She laughed like she meant it. She listened when he spoke, not because of who he was, but because she cared. She once told him that her greatest dream was to open a tiny school in a countryside village, to teach children who had nothing but the sky and each other. "Does that sound silly?" she asked once as they sat by the Han River, their breath visible in the winter air. "No," he whispered. "That sounds like something the world desperately needs." They fell in love slowly, sweetly, like leaves turning in autumn, one day at a time. And when he finally told her the truth about his last name, his family, the company that owned half the city, she didn't run. She just looked at him, eyes full of quiet understanding. "I don't care where you come from," she said, "as long as you know where you want to go." But that didn't mean their love was easy. Jaehoon's family was a fortress, his mother especially. Cold, calculating, obsessed with legacy and bloodlines. When she found out about Haejin, her disapproval was swift and merciless. "A bookstore clerk?" she hissed across the dinner table, her words sharp as broken glass. "Do you think love is enough to carry the Kong name?" "I love her," Jaehoon said simply, knowing full well the war he was igniting. "You're throwing away everything your father built. For what? A fantasy?" He didn't answer, because deep down, he was tired of living a life built by someone else's dreams. So they married in secret, a small ceremony in the countryside, just the two of them, under cherry blossoms in bloom. No diamonds, no press, just whispered vows, shared tears, and the promise to face the world together. For a while, they were happy, truly happy. They lived in a modest apartment in the quieter part of the city. Haejin continued to teach part-time, and Jaehoon balanced his corporate duties with stolen nights on the rooftop, watching stars with her. They cooked together, danced in the kitchen, left sticky notes on the bathroom mirror with silly messages. "You make my heart forget its walls," he wrote once. She saved it inside her favorite book. But even love has limits when it's constantly under siege. Rumors began to swirl. A secret marriage, an unknown woman. Tabloids stalked Jaehoon, and board members whispered behind closed doors. His mother gave him an ultimatum: leave her or lose his inheritance. He didn't leave, but something in him began to fracture. The weight of expectations, the legacy he never asked for. It all came crashing down in quiet ways. He started staying out later, missing dinners, coming home with eyes clouded by exhaustion and silence. He never stopped loving her, but he began to lose himself. Haejin noticed. Of course she did. One night, as he sat on the edge of their bed, shoulders heavy, She knelt before him and took his hands. "Tell me what's hurting you," she pleaded. "I don't know who I am anymore," he said. "I'm caught between two lives, and I don't know which one is real." She wrapped her arms around him, resting her head on his chest. "Then let's create our own. Just you and me." But reality has a way of creeping in. A few months later, Haejin stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, hands trembling, heart full of quiet hope. But that moment never came. Jihoon had changed. He still kissed her forehead in the mornings and brought home her favorite pastries when he remembered. But the warmth in his eyes, that quiet fire that once burned just for her, was flickering, dimming. He had become distracted, distant. She noticed how he stared at his phone for hours, how his laughter faded, how the bed felt colder even when he was in it. At first, she tried to understand. Maybe it was pressure. Maybe the company was taking its toll. Maybe he just needed space. But then came the late-night calls, the messages he would hide, the subtle smell of a new perfume on his collar, the guilt in his voice whenever he said her name. She didn't want to believe it, until one night, everything broke. She had made dinner, his favorite spicy tofu stew, with steamed rice and fresh side dishes. She wore the soft blue sweater he once said made her look like spring. She rehearsed her words in the mirror for hours. "I'm pregnant," she whispered to her reflection over and over. "We're going to be a family, a real one." But he came home late, again. His tie was loosened, his shirt half tucked in, and his eyes were glassy, like he was far away. And this time, he didn't offer an excuse. He didn't even notice the candles she had lit or the food going cold on the table. "I need to talk to you," Haejin said, her voice steady. But Jihoon barely looked up. "Not now. I'm tired." She stood there in silence as he walked past her, the sound of his shoes against the floor echoing like the end of something sacred. The next morning, she found the magazine on the kitchen counter. Yurichai. The name stared back at her in bold gold letters. Asia's Supermodel of the Year. Jihoon was in the photo too, smiling beside her on a red carpet, his hand lightly touching the small of her back. Her breath caught. He hadn't told her. He hadn't mentioned the event, let alone that he had gone with another woman. That was the moment something inside Haejin cracked. Not shattered, not yet, but cracked like a porcelain cup that had been dropped just once too many times. When he came home that evening, she confronted him. "I saw the photo," she said. Her voice trembled, not from rage, but from heartbreak. Jihoon didn't deny it. He didn't even flinch. "It was just business," he said too quickly. She stared at him. "Are you still in this marriage, Jihoon? Or am I the only one trying?" Silence. "Please," she whispered. "Just tell me. Tell me if you've fallen for her." He looked at her then, and something in his eyes, something that refused to meet hers, answered for him. And Haejin knew. That night, she curled up in bed, one hand over her belly, the other over her mouth, trying not to cry loud enough for the child inside her to hear. The days passed slowly after that. He grew colder, more absent. The house that once held laughter now echoed with silence. And though she hadn't yet told him, her pregnancy began to show. A gentle curve, a new softness in her steps. Then came the worst. One cold morning, Jihoon returned from a trip abroad. His suitcase still bore airport tags. His eyes were heavy. "I want a divorce," he said. Just like that. No apology. No explanation. Only the bitter taste of finality. Haejin froze. "You're not even going to ask me how I feel?" she whispered. "You're not going to ask if there's something I need to say?" He closed his eyes. "I can't do this anymore." She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him everything. About the child. About the nights she cried into her pillow. About how she had waited for him like a lighthouse waits for a ship lost at sea. But something stopped her. Pride? Fear? Perhaps it was the quiet understanding that this man, the one standing in front of her now, was no longer the Jihoon who had kissed her under the cherry blossoms. He was someone else now. Someone colder. Someone who had chosen a path that no longer had room for her. She signed the papers. With shaking hands and a hollow heart, She let him go. He left the apartment without looking back. She was alone. And yet, she wasn't. Because days after the divorce, Haejin lay on an exam table, her doctor frowning softly at the screen. "There's something I need to show you," the doctor said, turning the monitor toward her. 3 heartbeats, 3 tiny flickers, 3 lives, triplets. Haejin gasped, tears falling freely. It wasn't just a baby. It was a trio of miracles. In that moment, everything changed. She wasn't just a woman abandoned. She was a mother now to 3 little lights growing inside her. She left Seoul that winter quietly. No one followed. No one stopped her. She took only what she needed: a few clothes, her books, and the sonogram photo. She moved to a coastal village far from the noise and neon of the city, where the air smelled like salt and the stars could actually be seen. But silence could be cruel, too. Every now and then, her mind drifted back to Jihoon. His voice, his touch, the warmth of his hand resting on her back as they crossed the street. The way he used to hold her hand as if he were afraid to let go. And then the other images came, the way he had looked at her before asking for the divorce. Empty, resigned, like she was a chapter he had closed without reading to the end. She shook the thoughts away. This wasn't about him anymore. Her body was changing fast. She could feel the heaviness in her bones, the way her legs swelled by midday, the way her breath shortened after just a few steps. Her doctor in the nearby town had already warned her. Triplet pregnancies were delicate. She needed rest, support. She had neither. Still, she pushed forward. Every morning, she walked slowly to the village school, where she had been given a part-time job as a tutor. The principal, a kind widow in her 60s, had taken pity on her and offered her work when she saw Haejin helping local children read in the park. The pay was small, but it gave Haejin purpose. And purpose was the only thing holding her together. The children loved her. They would sit around her in a circle wide-eyed, listening to stories about stars and ancient legends, their voices echoing laughter through the thin classroom walls. And at night, she would sit by her small stove, rubbing her swollen belly and whispering to her children. "You don't know it yet," she said once, voice breaking, "but you saved me. I was falling apart, but you gave me something to live for." It wasn't easy. Nothing about her life now was. There were days when the pain in her back made her cry quietly into her pillow. Days when she ran out of money before the month was over. Nights when she dreamt of Jihoon walking through the door, only to wake up to cold sheets and the sound of rain hitting the roof. One evening, as the wind howled outside and her small kerosene lamp flickered against the dampness, she felt a sharp pain in her side. It was sudden, deep, unlike anything before. She froze. Then, another wave of pain. "No, not yet," she gasped, clutching the side of the table. She was only in her 7th month. Too early, too dangerous. Crawling to the door, she managed to scream for help before collapsing on the porch. The village nurse, a no-nonsense woman with a heart of gold, rushed her to the nearest hospital. An hour away, the road was rough, winding. Rain lashed the windows. Inside the ambulance, Haejin clung to consciousness, her breath shallow. "Please," she whispered, her voice nearly gone. "Save them. Save my babies." When she woke, the world was white, the sterile brightness of a hospital room. The nurse stood at her side, her face drawn with concern. And something else. Haejin blinked. "The babies? They're alive," the nurse said, placing a hand on her arm. Tiny, but strong. Tears spilled from her eyes. She hadn't even realized she'd been holding her breath. "Can I see them?" "In time. They're in the NICU. They need rest just like you." But the nurse didn't leave. She sat there, hesitating, fingers folded tightly in her lap. "What is it?" Haejin asked, her voice trembling. The nurse took a breath. "There's something you need to know. Someone showed up at the hospital while you were unconscious." Haejin's heartbeat stumbled. "Who?" The nurse hesitated. "He said his name was Kang Jihoon." The room went silent. Haejin felt the air thicken. Her mouth went dry. "No, couldn't be." How? How would he know where she was? She hadn't contacted anyone. She'd vanished from his world. The nurse continued gently. He said he was your husband. We're not married anymore? Hagen whispered, staring blankly at the wall. He didn't leave a message. He looked shocked, like he'd seen a ghost. He just stood there for a while, watching the babies through the glass. Then he left. A wave of heat surged through her chest. Confusion, fear, rage. Jihoon had seen the babies? She closed her eyes, trying to imagine his face. What had he thought? Had he realized they were his? Did he even want to? For the next few days, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Why now? Why after all this time? And then came the strangest thing. A bouquet of pale yellow tulips. No card, no note, but she recognized the flowers instantly. They were her favorite. Jihoon used to bring them to her every year on their wedding anniversary. Her hands trembled as she touched the petals. Was this a sign? An apology? A plea? The nurse said he hadn't returned. But Hagen couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't gone far. One night, as she sat beside the incubators, whispering to her sleeping children, she felt a presence behind her. She turned. He was there. Jihoon, older, thinner, his eyes sunken with exhaustion, his hair damp from the rain outside. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, watching, breathing heavily like he had run all the way from the past. And then, finally, his voice soft, almost broken. They look just like me. She swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing herself to stay calm. They don't know who you are. I didn't know either, he said, until I saw them. She turned back to the glass. What are you doing here, Jihoon? I came to, I don't know. He sighed. I didn't expect this. I didn't expect anything. But when I saw them, I realized what I threw away. She didn't respond. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness, he added quietly. I know I don't deserve it. I wanted to see them. Hagen's voice was steady, but cold. You saw them. Now you can leave. I'm not the same man I was. No, she said. You're not. That man loved me. That man held my hand when the world felt too heavy. You left her behind. Jihoon's eyes filled with something she hadn't seen in a long time. Sorrow. Real deep sorrow. I'm sorry, Hagen. I don't know if that means anything anymore. But I am. She looked at him, her heart a battlefield of feelings. You saw what you left behind, she whispered. Now you have to decide if you're ready to fight for it. He sat in the hospital cafeteria for hours, sipping cold coffee he didn't drink. Every time a nurse walked by, he looked up, hoping for a glimpse of Hagen. But she didn't come, and he didn't dare go back to the NICU alone. He had already stood on the edge of something fragile. Their children, his mistakes, her silence, and he wasn't sure if it would shatter or let him in. When he finally gathered the courage to return to the maternity floor, she was gone. Her bed was empty. Panic bloomed in his chest. For a brief, sickening moment, he thought she had run away again, that she had taken the babies, disappeared into some new corner of the world, leaving him once more to drown in the consequences of his own decisions. But then a nurse approached, recognizing him. She's not far, she said gently, just taking a walk in the courtyard. Needed air. Jihoon thanked her, then made his way down the corridor, his heart hammering like a boy's. He found her outside, sitting alone on a bench near the hospital garden. Her coat was wrapped tightly around her small frame, and her eyes were turned upward toward the sky. She didn't look at him when he approached. She didn't need to. She knew he was there. He stood beside her in silence, hands in his pockets. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, she broke the stillness. Do you know what it felt like, she said softly, to carry them while pretending you never existed? His mouth opened, but no sound came. I talked to them every night, she continued, voice trembling. Told them stories, sang to them, promised them they were loved. But inside I was scared, terrified that I wouldn't be enough. That one day they'd ask about you and I'd have nothing to say but that you didn't want us. I didn't know, Jihoon said, barely above a whisper. I didn't even know you were pregnant." Her eyes flashed as she turned toward him. "Because you never gave me the chance to tell you. You were already gone. You were holding someone else's hand while I was holding my stomach, trying not to fall apart. I was lost," he said. "Back then, I thought I was choosing what I had to. The company, the legacy, the life my family built. I convinced myself it was duty." "And what about love?" she asked bitterly. "Did duty swallow that too?" He looked down, ashamed. "No," he murmured, "but I buried it." A silence fell between them again, heavier now. The wind rustled the dead leaves at their feet. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. "You said something last night," he said slowly, "that I had to decide if I'm ready to fight for what I left behind." She didn't answer. "I want to fight," he said more firmly now. "I want to be in their lives. I don't care what I have to give up." Haejin turned away, her jaw tight. "You think it's that easy? That you can just walk back in and play father? What about the damage? What about the nights I spent alone in a hospital bed, praying they'd survive another day?" "I know it's not easy," he said. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm not here for forgiveness. I'm here for them. And for you. If you'll let me." Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and raw. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she whispered. He sat beside her slowly, keeping distance between them, afraid to touch her, afraid to shatter her all over again. "I'll earn it," he said. "One day at a time. One diaper at a time. One bottle. One night of no sleep. One small smile. I'll earn every second of being in their lives." Haejin looked at him then, really looked, and what she saw wasn't the Jihoon she had married. Not the polished heir or the man who broke her heart. This was someone else. Someone broken. Someone real. "Why now?" she asked. "Why did you come?" He hesitated. Then, with a shaking breath, he said, "I saw them. In a photo. A random picture in a local blog post. Just 3 little boys playing in a field. But I knew they were mine. I felt it in my bones. I couldn't sleep after that. I couldn't breathe." Haejin swallowed hard. She remembered that day the neighbor had posted the photo. She had never imagined it would find its way back to him. "I thought it was too late," he said. "But I had to try. I couldn't live with myself knowing I let them grow up thinking their father didn't care." For a moment, they just sat there, side by side, hearts trembling. Then the hospital intercom crackled above them, calling her back to the NICU. She stood, brushing away her tears. "I'm not promising anything," she said. "I won't let them be hurt. Not by you. Not by your family. If you want to be here, you'll have to prove yourself, not just to me. To them. Even if they don't understand it yet." He nodded. "I will. And Jihoon." He looked up. "Don't bring flowers anymore," she said, her voice barely holding together. "Bring time. Bring presence. Bring honesty." She walked away, and he remained sitting, letting the wind sting his skin. For the first time in a long time, he felt small. But for the first time, he also felt clear. That night, Jihoon checked into a modest motel near the hospital. No penthouses. No suits. No assistants. Just a man trying to start over from the bottom of the wreckage he created. The next morning, he returned to the hospital at sunrise and stood outside the NICU, watching the tiny babies through the glass. A nurse approached him. "They're strong," she said kindly. "Fighters. They get it from their mother," Jihoon replied. She smiled. "Would you like to hold one?" His breath caught. Can I? If their mother approves," she said. "Ask her." Jihoon turned, just as Haejin entered the hallway, holding a small bottle of formula. Their eyes met. She paused. For a second, neither moved. Then, slowly, she nodded once. He followed her into the room, heart pounding. Inside, the hum of machines was constant. The babies were so small, swaddled in blankets, their little hands twitching in sleep. Haejin gently lifted the tiniest one. A boy with dark lashes and a furrowed brow just like Jihoon's. She held him out. "Support the head," she said softly. Jihoon's hands trembled as he took his son into his arms for the first time. The weight was light, almost nothing, but it crushed him with emotion. The baby stirred, a soft sigh escaping his lips as he nestled into Jihoon's chest. Something inside him shattered, and something else, something sacred, began to rebuild. He looked at Haejin. "Thank you," he whispered. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away. He wasn't allowed to hold them often, not yet. But when he could, he did so with reverence, like he was holding fragments of redemption. He learned their rhythms, their cries. He watched their tiny chests rise and fall and counted each breath as if it were a blessing he didn't deserve. And all the while, Haejin watched him. At first, from a distance, wary, guarded, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But slowly, she began to see something change in him. Not performative, not for show. Something real. He asked questions. He listened. He helped without being asked. When one of the babies had trouble breathing one night, he sat beside the incubator, whispering stories until the alarms stopped. Still, she didn't let herself feel hope. She couldn't. Not yet. One afternoon, after feeding time, she sat beside Jihoon in the hospital garden. It was quiet, warm, the kind of late spring day that smelled faintly of earth and blossoms. Jihoon held his notebook, fingers stained with ink. "What are you writing?" she asked, her voice low. He looked down, startled. "Letters. For them." "Why?" "Because there will come a day when they'll ask me why I wasn't there, why I left. I need to be ready to tell them the truth." She watched him, his eyes heavy with remorse, and something inside her tightened. "Will the truth be enough?" she asked. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but it's all I have now." That night, she dreamed of their wedding day, of cherry blossoms floating like snow, of his hand brushing hers as he whispered promises. And when she woke, tears clung to her lashes like fragile threads. The babies grew stronger. Day by day, they began breathing on their own. Their cries grew louder, their eyes more alert. The doctors smiled more often, the nurses less tense. There was hope again, and with that hope came decisions. "I'm taking them home next week," Haejin said one morning, her voice firm. Jihoon looked up from where he was gently changing one of the boys' diapers. "Home. The village. The house is ready. They'll be safe there." He nodded slowly, then hesitated. "Do you want help?" She paused, caught off guard. "With what?" she asked cautiously. "With moving, settling in, diapers, feedings, midnight screams. Whatever you'll let me do." She studied his face. He didn't ask if he could live with her. He didn't ask to come back. He just asked to help. "I don't know yet," she said after a long silence. "But if you're serious, you can come to the village and prove it." That was all he needed. The following week, they left the hospital. Jihoon rode in a separate car behind them, carrying the baby's tiny bags, following them like a man chasing the future he once abandoned. He didn't speak much on the way. Haejin barely glanced at him. When they arrived at the little village house, small, weathered, but full of warmth, the neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering. The scandal of her past had become quiet gossip, and now, her return with the mysterious father of the children stirred old talk. Inside the house, Jihoon helped place the sleeping babies in their new cribs. Everything smelled like fresh laundry and lavender. The furniture was secondhand. The floors creaked, but it was a home, the first real home he had ever felt. Later, as he stepped outside to bring in the last bag, he saw her standing near the gate, staring at the horizon. The sky was painted in oranges and violets. She looked small, and so very tired. He approached quietly. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer right away. "I'm scared," she said finally, her voice cracking. "Of trusting you, of trusting myself again." He nodded slowly. "Then let's be scared together." She looked at him, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "You hurt me in a way I didn't think was survivable." "I know," he said softly, "and I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life." A silence stretched between them, charged with everything unsaid. Then, faint cries echoed from inside the house. One, then two, then 3, overlapping in a familiar chaotic harmony. She turned. He followed. Inside, they worked side by side, calming, changing, feeding. It was clumsy at first. He fumbled with the bottle, she dropped the pacifier. But by the time all 3 were sleeping again, a quiet laugh escaped her lips. He turned to her, startled. "Did you just laugh?" he asked. "I think I did," she said, surprised. Something soft passed between them. No declarations, no promises, just that one laugh. Raw, unexpected, and desperately needed. Over the following weeks, Jihoon stayed in the village. Not in her house, but nearby, renting a small room above the general store. Every day he came over, not as a husband, not yet, but as something else, as a man learning how to be present. He took the night shifts so she could sleep. He learned to swaddle, to sterilize bottles, to tell which cry meant hunger and which meant fear. He brought groceries, cooked simple meals, watched cartoons with them in the early morning. The villagers began to talk again, but this time with curiosity, maybe even admiration. Some nodded at him when he passed. Some smiled, and still every night he returned to his notebook. More letters, more truths. Then one night something changed. Haejin had fallen asleep on the couch, one of the babies in her arms. The room was dim, quiet, soft with the breathing of tiny bodies. Jihoon knelt beside her, gently lifting the baby from her arms and placing him in the crib. As he turned to cover her with a blanket, her eyes opened slowly. She looked at him. For the first time in months, her gaze wasn't full of fear or anger, just tired peace. She whispered, "You stayed." "I did," he said. She closed her eyes again, and for the first time in a long, long time, she let herself sleep. Not because she had to. Door to find him standing there, hair a mess, sleeves rolled up, holding fresh bread from the village bakery. He never knocked anymore. She never asked him to. One morning, while the twins were napping and the third, the quietest one, was chewing thoughtfully on his thumb in a bundle of blankets, Jihoon set down the laundry basket and looked around the living room. It was chaos. Diapers on the floor, a bottle under the couch, a pacifier inside a sock. But to him, it was perfect. Haejin was in the kitchen, hair pulled into a loose bun, a faint stain on her shirt from mashed carrots. She looked exhausted, but to him, she had never looked more radiant. "You're doing it again," she said, not turning around. "Doing what?" he asked, confused, staring, like you're trying to memorize everything. He smiled, leaning against the doorway. "Maybe I am," she sighed, half amused. "Stop romanticizing this. It's just laundry and crying and spit up." He crossed the room, slowly, deliberately, until he stood behind her. "No," he said softly. "It's the life I gave up, and somehow, you still let me be part of it." She didn't respond. She didn't have to, but something unspoken passed between them. Something warmer, more forgiving. Still, she hadn't let him move in. Not yet. He stayed in the little room above the general store, where the walls were too thin and the water always cold. He didn't complain. He never asked for more than what she gave. But the more he gave to the children, and to her, the more something inside him ached to stay longer, to not have to say goodbye at the door each night, to hear her voice in the morning without having to knock, to be a family again. But she wasn't ready, and he didn't push. Then came the letter. It arrived without warning. A sleek, expensive envelope bearing the Kang family crest. Haejin found it on the kitchen table when she came back from the clinic with the babies. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Jihoon watched her face change as she read. First confusion, then tight-lipped dread. He stood. "What is it?" She handed him the letter without a word. He read in silence. His mother. A formal invitation to a charity gala in Seoul, hosted by the Kang family's foundation. A request, no, a command that Jihoon attend, with his new family. "Ignore it," Haejin said quickly. "We're not going." Jihoon said nothing. "I mean it, Jihoon," she added. "This is a trap." She doesn't want to meet her grandchildren. She wants a show. A scandal. I know, he said. Then why are you hesitating? He folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. Because if we don't go, she'll come here. She'll twist the story. Tell the world I abandoned my children. That you seduced me. That none of this is real. Does it matter what they think? She asked, voice sharp. It matters what the boys will grow up hearing, he said quietly. And I'm not going to let her rewrite our story again. She crossed her arms, trembling. I don't want to be paraded around like I'm a mistake that needs to be explained away. You're not, he said fiercely. You never were, and I'll stand beside you. If we go together, as a family, on our terms. Heijin looked at him, eyes shining with something complicated, part fear, part hope. You really think we can face them? She asked. He reached for her hand. Not just them, the world. She looked down at their joined hands, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. The following week was chaos. A neighbor offered to help watch the babies while they went to Seoul. Heijin borrowed a simple black dress from a friend. Jihoon bought a small silver pin shaped like a star. Not flashy, just something to remind her of the nights she stayed up whispering dreams to their unborn children. They drove in silence most of the way. The city loomed ahead like a memory too big to hold. As they stepped into the gala, all eyes turned. The lights were bright. The cameras clicked instantly. Whispers spread like fire. Jihoon held Heijin's hand tightly. She walked beside him with quiet grace, chin high, heart racing. His mother stood at the far end of the hall, surrounded by press and executives. When she saw them, she froze, just for a second, before schooling her features into a tight smile. They approached. Mother, Jihoon said. Jihoon. Her eyes flicked to Heijin. And this must be the mother of your children. Heijin gave a small bow. Yes, I am. The older woman's eyes scanned her, calculating. Then she smiled for the cameras. Welcome to the family. The lie burned in the air. After the obligatory photos, the three of them stepped into a private lounge. Jihoon didn't sit. Neither did Heijin. His mother did. I assume you know why I invited you. To pretend everything is fine? Heijin said calmly. To make sure your reputation stays clean? The older woman raised an eyebrow. You're sharper than you look. And you're colder than your smile, Heijin replied without flinching. Jihoon stepped forward. Enough. We came to be clear. I'm with Heijin. We have 3 children. They are your grandchildren, whether you like it or not. His mother leaned back. I don't care about your woman or her children. I care about the company and its image. You have a choice, Jihoon. Stay in Seoul. Take your place at the top. Or stay in that village and throw away everything your father built. Jihoon didn't hesitate. I already made my choice, he said. And it wasn't about legacy. It was about love. He reached for Heijin's hand again. His mother scoffed. Romanticism doesn't feed empires. No, he said, but it saves people. It saved me. And then, with Heijin beside him, he turned and walked away. They didn't look back. Outside, the air was crisp, cold, honest. They stood on the steps of the hall, under the city lights, silent for a long moment. Then Heijin exhaled. That was terrifying, she said. He smiled. You were brilliant. She looked at him, eyes filled with something she hadn't shown in a long time. Trust. I think I'm ready, she whispered. For what? For us. And in that moment, standing beneath the stars they once only dreamed under, something broke open between them. Not the past. The babies were waiting, unaware of what their parents had just survived. One of them squealed the moment Jihoon entered the room, arms flailing, and Heijin laughed. Really laughed, as she leaned down to scoop him into her arms. It was a sound Jihoon hadn't realized he'd missed so much until he heard it again. They spent that evening together, all 5 of them, in the warmth of the house. No cameras, no luxury, just mashed sweet potatoes, spilled water, and lullabies off-key. The kind of night that doesn't look like a victory, but feels like one. But not all wars end with a single battle. 2 days later, Jihoon received a call. He stepped outside to answer it, away from the sound of the babies. His phone vibrated once, the screen flashing with a name he hadn't expected to see so soon. Yura. His breath caught. He looked over his shoulder to the house, then slowly answered. Hello. There was a pause on the other end. Then her voice, calm, distant, but layered with something sharp. So it's true. He didn't speak. You went back to her, she said. You're living in some fishing village playing house with your secret family like a drama character who lost his mind. It's not a secret anymore, Jihoon said, quietly. And it's not playing. She laughed, cold, humorless. You think this is over? That you can walk away from everything and no one will say anything? I don't care what anyone says anymore. Well, you should, she snapped. Because your mother isn't letting this go. She's humiliated Jihoon. She said you embarrassed the entire family line. She's already meeting with the board. Do you know what that means? He felt his chest tighten. Let her. I don't want her company. Yura's voice turned cruel. It's not about the company. It's about you. She's preparing to challenge your rights, your inheritance, your name. She wants to erase your children from the family record. Jihoon went still. You're lying. I wish I was. She paused, then added more softly now. You know, I didn't think it would end this way. I always thought, maybe one day you'd really choose me. But now you're clinging to a fantasy. It's not a fantasy, Yura. It's a family. A silence. Then a sigh. She's going to destroy everything, Yura whispered. And you can't stop her if you're hiding in that village pretending to be normal. She hung up before he could reply. Jihoon stood frozen for a long moment, phone still in his hand, the wind cutting through his jacket. That night, he didn't say anything to Haejin. He held the babies like nothing had changed. He helped clean the kitchen. He kissed her forehead when she fell asleep on the couch again. But when he returned to the small room above the general store, he didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, hearing Yura's voice echo in the dark. Erase your children from the family record. It wasn't just a threat. It was a weapon. The next morning, Jihoon sat across from Haejin at the kitchen table. The babies were napping. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtain. I have to go to Seoul again, he said. She looked up sharply. Why? I need to stop something before it starts. Her eyes narrowed. What aren't you telling me? He hesitated. Then gently, my mother's planning to challenge the boys' rights. Legally. She wants to erase them. Haejin's breath caught. What? I don't know how far she'll go, but I need to go there. Talk to the lawyers. Fight it before it escalates. She stood, pacing the room. We already faced her. We already told the world. What else does she want from us? Control, he said quietly. She wants to control what the world sees and what it forgets. She turned to him, panic rising. What if she wins, Jihoon? What if she actually convinces them that I tricked you, or she won't? But what if she does? He stood, walking over to her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Then I walk away from it all. The company, the name, everything. Her eyes searched his. Would you really do that? I already did, he said. The moment I chose you. Her lips parted, but no words came. Only tears. He held her there, in the quiet morning light, while the world outside prepared to test them again. 3 days later, he was gone. The house felt different without him, not broken, just incomplete. Haejin kept herself busy with the children, but every time she heard the door creak, she looked up instinctively. Every time the phone rang, her heart raced. Then, on the 4th day, it came. A letter, not from Jihoon, from his mother. Haejin opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a legal notice, cold, cruel, printed in sterile ink. Petition to contest paternal rights. A formal request to begin proceedings to challenge the legitimacy of the children. Haejin stared at the words until they blurred. Her first instinct was to scream. Her second, to protect. She didn't cry. She didn't crumble. She took the letter, folded it neatly, and placed it beside Jihoon's empty coffee cup on the table. Then she went to her sons. She held them, kissed their foreheads, and whispered the same words into each of their ears. "Your father is fighting for you." That night, she left the lights on. She didn't sleep. She just waited for the knock on the door, for the next battle, for Jihoon. Where she didn't call him. She wanted to, 100 times. But something inside her, something proud and terrified, told her to wait, that if she called, he might lie. Or worse, tell her the truth, that he couldn't stop it, that they were already being erased. On the 5th day, she took the babies out for air. The sky was a dull gray, the kind of color that makes the world feel like it's holding its breath. She carried one in a sling, the others in the double stroller. Neighbors smiled, waved. A few stopped her to ask how Jihoon was doing. She didn't know how to answer. "He's fighting," was all she said. But her voice betrayed her. She didn't know if he was. By the time she returned home, her heart was tight with worry. She tried not to cry as she fed the boys, tried to stay steady while they clung to her fingers. That night, the power went out. A storm had passed through the village, tearing down a line somewhere up the hill. She lit candles and placed them near the windows. The flickering shadows danced against the walls. Rain tapped softly on the roof. And then, through the window headlights, her breath caught. She stood, her hands trembling. The door opened before she could even move. And there he was, Jihoon, soaked from the rain, eyes bloodshot. A deep exhaustion etched into every part of him. But he was there, alive, breathing, whole. She didn't run to him. She didn't have to. He walked in, quietly, and dropped the soaked duffel bag to the floor. His steps were slow, careful, reverent. She didn't speak. He looked at her, eyes locking like the first time he'd ever seen her. Then he dropped to his knees, right there, on the wooden floor, wet from his clothes, breath shaking. "I couldn't stop it," he said, voice barely audible. Her heart cracked. "They filed everything," he continued, staring at the floor. "They made it look like you manipulated me, that the children were conceived to extort the family, that I was unstable. I fought them. I stood in front of the board and told them everything. About us, about our marriage, about my mistakes. But it wasn't enough." She covered her mouth. "I'm so sorry, Haejin." And then he pulled something from his jacket. 3 sheets of paper. Birth certificates. She took them with trembling hands. At the top of each one, under father's name, was his. Kang Jihoon. What is this?" she whispered. "I made it legal," he said. "I filed it myself. Outside the family court. Outside her influence. I signed paternity papers. Registered them as my sons. All 3. Publicly. Irrevocably." She stared at him, the candles flickering in her eyes. "But your family? I don't care." He looked up, voice rough, desperate. "I don't care about their name, their money, their legacy. Let them erase me. Let them cut me out. I'd rather be nameless with you than powerful without you." A tear slipped down her cheek. "They'll ruin you," she whispered. "They already did," he said. "But you made me human again." He stood slowly, face inches from hers now, hands soaked and cold as they reached for her. "I know I failed you before. I know I don't deserve this second chance. But I'm begging you, don't send me away again. Let me stay. Not just in this house. In this life." The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. The babies stirred in the next room. She could feel her heart thudding in her chest. She wanted to hate him, wanted to scream at him for taking so long. But all she could do was step forward and wrap her arms around him. She held him tightly, fiercely, as if trying to shield him from the world. He collapsed into her embrace, burying his face in her neck. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid I'd never see you again. Afraid they'd take everything." "They didn't," he murmured. "They tried, but they couldn't." They stayed like that for what felt like forever, the storm fading slowly around them. Later that night, after the power returned and the babies had been soothed back to sleep, Haejin sat beside Jihoon on the floor of the nursery. The soft hum of the night filled the room. "Will they come after us again?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "Not legally, but they'll talk. They'll try to turn the world against us." She looked down at their children, all three sleeping soundly. "Let them talk," she said. "We'll write a different story." Jihoon reached over and took her hand. "Together," she nodded. "Together." And for the first time in what felt like lifetimes, she felt safe. Not because the world had stopped trying to break them. Jihoon was the first to wake. He stood at the door of the nursery watching them. His sons, all three, tangled in a pile of soft blankets, one sucking his thumb, another kicking in his sleep, the third still curled against his tiny stuffed fox. The air smelled faintly of milk and lavender, and for a moment, he simply stood there motionless, afraid to breathe too loud, as if he might wake from a dream. Behind him, Haejin stirred. She walked in slowly, still in her robe, her hair falling over her shoulder. Her eyes were heavy with sleep, but soft with something else, something tender. Jihoon turned to her, and without words, he reached for her hand. They stood there like that, fingers interlocked, two survivors watching the most fragile, sacred part of their journey breathing softly in the morning light. "You remember," she whispered, "how quiet it used to be?" He nodded. It felt like the walls were empty, like the silence was swallowing me. She turned to look at him, her voice barely audible. "Now the silence feels full." Jihoon nodded again. "They filled it. You filled it." Her eyes shimmered, and then, without warning, one of the boys let out a tiny yelp. Not quite a cry, just a sleepy complaint. Haejin smiled, letting go of Jihoon's hand and walking over to the crib. She scooped the little one into her arms with practiced ease. "You're the loudest," she murmured, kissing his forehead. "Just like your father." Jihoon grinned. He stepped forward and reached out, touching the baby's head gently. The child blinked at him, dazed, then yawned, as if unimpressed. "I'm still growing on him," Jihoon said. "He's the most stubborn," she replied. "Takes after both of us." They took the boys one by one into the living room. Jihoon laid out a mat, lined with toys and soft pillows, while Haejin prepared bottles in the kitchen. It was chaotic in the most beautiful way. Tiny socks flung across the floor, gurgling noises and messy hair, and Jihoon in his pajama pants chasing a crawling baby who had suddenly discovered the joy of escape. By noon, the babies were napping again, and the house had quieted down. Jihoon collapsed onto the couch, arms outstretched, eyes to the ceiling. "I think I've done more cardio in 3 hours than in a decade," he said, breathless. Haejin sat beside him, holding her tea. "You're only saying that because he pooped on your shirt." He looked down at the faint yellow stain and grimaced. "I'll never feel clean again." She laughed, full and free, but the laughter faded quickly. Her smile trembled. She looked down at her tea. "Can I ask you something?" Jihoon sat up. "Anything. If they had never been born." She paused, her throat tightening. "Would you have come back?" The question hit him like cold water. He didn't answer right away. He couldn't. She looked away. "You don't have to lie. I need to know if it was them, or me." Jihoon moved closer, taking the cup gently from her hands and placing it on the table. Then he turned to her, both hands on her shoulders. "It was you," he said. "It was always you." She blinked, tears already rising. "I was a coward," he said. "I ran. I convinced myself that the life we had wasn't enough because I didn't think I deserved how real it was. With you, everything felt terrifyingly honest. I didn't know how to live like that." She swallowed hard, eyes locked on his. "But when I saw you again, with them, I realized what I gave up. Not just a marriage, not just children. I gave up myself, the part of me that only ever existed with you." Her lips trembled. "Why are you saying this now?" "Because I never did before. And if we're going to move forward, you have to know that I loved you long before I knew they existed." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "And I never stopped." She leaned into his hand, eyes closed, breath shaking. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "Then let me prove it." every day. And then, slowly, cautiously, he leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, deep, full of every unspoken word they'd buried for years. When they pulled apart, her forehead rested against his. "I'm still afraid," she whispered. "So am I," he said. They sat there in silence, wrapped in the echo of something beginning again. That evening, Jihoon went outside to take out the trash. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in gold and peach. But as he turned to head back inside, he saw someone, standing at the end of the narrow road. A figure. He squinted. It was a man in a dark coat, too far away to see clearly. But the posture, the way he didn't move, made Jihoon's stomach twist. He stepped forward, heart pounding. The man turned, and then, slowly, he walked away. Jihoon stared after him, breath tight in his chest. He didn't know why, but he had the overwhelming feeling that someone was watching them, that something hadn't ended, that another storm might be coming. And this time, it wouldn't knock before it entered. He hadn't told Haejin. She had finally started to relax around him again. Her smile wasn't something rare or accidental anymore. It was becoming part of their rhythm. And the boys were thriving, rolling more, babbling more, even sleeping a little longer through the night. The last thing he wanted was to let fear back into the house they had worked so hard to make safe. But he couldn't shake it. So the next morning, after breakfast, when Haejin was playing with the twins on the floor, Jihoon quietly slipped out and walked down the same road. The air was damp with early mist, and the sound of birdsong seemed quieter than usual, distant, almost cautious. He reached the spot where the man had stood. Nothing, just gravel and old trees lining the path, their leaves heavy from last night's dew. He looked around, checked behind the tree line. Still nothing, but there were fresh cigarette butts on the ground, 3 of them, and faint footprints near the ditch. Someone had been waiting, watching. He returned home with the feeling still stuck in his chest like a stone. Haejin looked up when he entered, brow furrowing. "Where'd you go?" "Just outside," he replied. "Needed some air." She studied him for a second too long, but didn't press. Instead, she handed him one of the boys and returned to folding laundry. But that night, as he stood by the window, staring out into the dark, he caught it again. Movement. A figure. Across the street, half concealed behind a fence. He opened the door fast, stepping out, calling, "Hey!" The figure turned and fled into the trees. Jihoon ran after him without thinking. Barefoot, heart pounding, branches scratching his arms as he moved through the undergrowth. But the man was fast, too fast. And soon, all Jihoon could hear was his own breath and the distant sound of rustling leaves disappearing deeper into the forest. He stood there, hands on his knees trying to catch his breath. And then he saw it, nailed to a tree, a white envelope. Jihoon tore it open with shaking hands. Inside, a photo. Haejin, holding the babies, smiling, taken from behind a window. Jihoon's stomach dropped. His blood went cold. He turned and ran back to the house. When he burst through the front door, Haejin jumped, startled, holding one of the boys in her arms. Her face immediately shifted when she saw his expression. "What happened?" she asked, stepping forward. He handed her the photo. She stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It was left for me, in the woods. Someone was watching you." She sank into the nearest chair, eyes wide, arms tightening protectively around their son. Jihoon knelt in front of her. "You're safe now, I swear. I'll protect you. But I need to know something." She looked up, barely breathing. "Is there anyone from your past before me? Who would want to hurt you? Someone who knew where you lived before?" She shook her head slowly. "No one. I don't have family left. No exes. No one with a reason to." She stopped. Her eyes darkened. "What?" Jihoon asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Your mother." Jihoon's jaw clenched. "She wouldn't go that far," he said. "She wouldn't send someone here." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. "She tried to erase our children," Heijin said quietly. What makes you think she wouldn't go further? He sat back on his heels, mind racing. I'll find out, he said. I'll go back to Seoul tomorrow. Quietly. I'll ask around. Find out if she hired someone. I'll stop this. Heijin grabbed his hand. Don't go alone. I have to. What if something happens to you? He reached up, brushing her hair from her face. Then at least you'll know I didn't run away this time. That night, they didn't sleep. They sat on the floor beside the cribs, holding hands, taking turns watching the window. And in the silence, Jihoon made a vow. Not out loud, not even to her, but deep inside. Whoever was watching, whoever thought they could take this away, would learn that he was no longer the man who gave up. He was the man who would protect, whatever it took. The photo haunted him. Heijin smiling in their living room, unaware of the camera watching her through the glass. Whoever took it was close, too close, and that meant this wasn't just about fear anymore. It was about control, a threat, a message. He arrived in Seoul by early afternoon, pulling his hood over his head, slipping through the crowds with practiced silence. The city pulsed around him like a living thing, loud, chaotic, suffocating. A world he used to rule, now foreign and cold. He made his way to a discreet cafe near Gangnam, a place he once met with private investigators his mother had used before. He doubted they'd welcome him now, but he was willing to take that risk. The door chimed when he entered. The woman behind the counter glanced up. Her eyes widened slightly when she recognized him. She said nothing, just motioned subtly toward the back room. He nodded. Inside, the air was heavier, darker. The hum of the espresso machine faded behind the closed door. Jihoon Kong, a voice said from the shadows. Didn't expect to see you again. At least not alone. Jihoon sat without waiting to be invited. I need information. Fast. The man across from him leaned forward, his gray hair slicked back, a scar running just below his left eye. A detail Jihoon remembered vividly. He had once helped Jihoon's mother erase a scandal involving a cousin and a stolen inheritance. What kind of information? The man asked. Jihoon pulled the photo from his pocket and slid it across the table. Who took this? The man studied it, then gave a low whistle. You've got kids now? Jihoon's eyes darkened. Answer the question. The man chuckled under his breath. No need to get hostile. You should know your mother's been asking a lot of favors lately. Asking about you. About your woman. Jihoon's stomach turned. Is she having the house watched? Not directly. Too risky. Too public. But she's got a guy. Ex-corporate security. Works freelance now. Name's Ma Sang-woo. Real discreet. Expensive. Where is he? The man shrugged. Depends on the day. But if he took this photo, he's not just watching. He's waiting. Jihoon leaned in. For what? The man didn't smile this time. For you to mess up. For her to give him permission to act. Jihoon sat back, heart pounding. She wouldn't. Not physically. Not with the children. The man cut him off. You don't understand your mother. You think she cares about blood. She doesn't. She cares about the Kong name. If someone threatens it, she'll erase it. Quietly. Thoroughly. Jihoon closed his eyes for a moment, a sharp breath catching in his throat. I need to find this man, he said. Before he does anything. I'll ask around, the man said. But it'll cost you. I don't care. Jihoon stood to leave, but paused at the door. If anything happens to them, he said, voice low and dangerous, I'll burn every name you've ever worked with to the ground. The man didn't flinch. I believe you, he said simply. That night, Jihoon booked a hotel on the edge of the city, cheap, anonymous. He didn't call Heijin. He didn't want her to hear the fear in his voice. Not until he had something real to say. But just before dawn, his phone buzzed. A message. You're not the only one who can protect something. Attached was another photo. Heijin, in the market, alone. He bolted upright. This wasn't just a threat. It was a war. He called the number. It rang once, twice, then a voice, distorted, unfamiliar. She's beautiful, it said. Even more in person. Jihoon's grip tightened on the phone. If you touch her, I won't have to. If you do what you're told. What do you want? The voice chuckled softly. To remind you who you belong to. Then the line went dead. Jihoon stared at the screen, heart racing, rage surging through his veins. He didn't hesitate. He packed his bag, threw on his coat, and took the first train back to the village. He didn't sleep on the ride. His mind replayed every moment. The photo, the voice, the feeling of standing powerless while someone else watched his life from the shadows. When he finally arrived, the village was still cloaked in morning mist. He ran all the way to the house. The front door was closed, the windows intact, but his chest didn't stop tightening until he opened the door and saw her. Ajin, in the kitchen, rocking one of the babies, humming softly. She looked up in surprise when she saw him. "You're back," she said, walking toward him. "Jihoon, what?" He grabbed her into his arms before she could finish. Holding her so tightly she gasped. "Jihoon, what happened?" He pulled back, his hands shaking as he cupped her face. "They're watching you," he whispered. "They followed you to the market. I got a message, a photo, a voice. It was him, Sang-woo. My mother sent him." Her face paled. "You said she wouldn't." "I was wrong," he said. "She will. And now I know what she's waiting for." "What?" "For me to leave you again. For you to be vulnerable." Ajin's voice cracked. "So what do we do?" He looked at her, eyes hard, jaw set. "How do we fight someone like her?" Jihoon exhaled slowly. His eyes were tired but clear. "We stop hiding. We stop reacting. We get ahead of her." She looked down, clutching the baby tighter. "And what if she hurts them anyway? What if this man she sent?" "She won't get the chance," he said, with a fire in his voice she hadn't heard before. "Not this time." He turned and walked into the bedroom. Moments later, he returned with a small duffel bag, the one he'd used since Seoul, and unzipped it on the kitchen table. Inside, a stack of folders, legal documents, records, photos, phone logs. Ajin blinked, confused. "What is all this?" "Evidence," he said. "While I was in Seoul, I didn't just look for Sang-woo. I dug deeper. I found things, contracts, hired surveillance logs, payments, all signed by someone inside my mother's circle, her personal secretary." He handed her a document, a security invoice with her name on it. "She wasn't just watching us," Jihoon continued. "She had people tailing you for months, even before I came back, even before she admitted the truth to the board." Ajin's hands trembled. "She wanted to destroy me quietly." "No," Jihoon said bitterly. "She wanted to erase you, erase them, as if you were just a mistake in the narrative of her perfect son's life." He pulled out another document, a letter drafted by the Kang family's legal team, never sent. It suggested Jihoon claim mental instability, implying coercion, emotional manipulation, the sort of language that was designed to make Ajin look like the threat. She felt sick. "Why are you showing me this now?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why now and not before?" "Because now," he said, meeting her eyes. "I'm ready to bring her down, and I'm not doing it without you." Her breath caught. He sat down across from her, the tension in his shoulders unraveling just slightly. "I know what she's capable of, and I know I can't protect you the way you deserve, not as long as she has power over our lives. That's why we have to expose her, publicly. We take everything she tried to hide, and we bring it to the surface." Ajin swallowed hard. "That will destroy her." Jihoon nodded. "And it might destroy me too, but not us." She looked at him, heart pounding. "What are you planning?" "There's a board meeting in 3 days. It's the annual audit. Every major shareholder will be there, and for the first time since I walked away, they've invited me back. Not because they want to, but because they need me." Ajin shook her head. "You're walking straight into her world." "I'm walking in with truth," he said. "And with you, if you'll come." Her mouth parted. "Me? She's been telling everyone that you're weak, that you're the stain on our story. But they don't know the woman I know. The woman who raised 3 sons alone. The woman who lost everything and still smiled at strangers in the market. He reached for her hand. I want them to see you. Not the version she built. The real one. She didn't speak. Not for a long moment. Then, softly, you're asking me to walk back into a room full of people who once thought I was disposable. I'm asking you to show them they were wrong. The silence stretched between them. And then a sound. Glass. Shattering. Jihoon's head whipped toward the window. A small stone had cracked the outer pane. On the ground outside, a white envelope. He was out the door before Haejin could move. He picked it up, tore it open. Inside, another photo, this time of one of the boys, alone, in the stroller just a few steps from the front porch. The image was time-stamped. That morning, Haejin appeared behind him, already trembling. What is it? Jihoon. What is it? He handed her the photo in silence. She stared, and then she collapsed into the porch railing, her body folding under the weight of panic. No, she whispered. No, they were inside, all morning. He was close enough to take this from the yard, Jihoon said, his voice low and shaking. He's escalating. She turned to him, eyes wild. This isn't just watching anymore. This is a threat. I know. Jihoon looked out toward the trees beyond the road. His jaw clenched so tight it ached. She's telling me what happens if I keep going. Then don't, Haejin said, her voice breaking. Jihoon, please. We'll go somewhere. Disappear again. We don't need revenge. We just need to be safe. He turned back to her, stepping close. No, he said. We don't disappear. That's what she wants, for us to be ghosts. To live small, afraid. He cupped her face. Don't let fear write our ending, Haejin. Her lips trembled. Then how does this end? His voice dropped. With truth and fire. She looked into his eyes, searching for something solid, something that wouldn't break. And for the first time in a long time, she found it. Not in promises, not in words, but in him, unshaken, unmoving. Inside the house, the lights were low. Haejin stood near the crib, watching their sons breathe, her hand resting gently over one small chest. Their skin was warm, their cheeks flushed with dreams. She turned at the sound of Jihoon stepping out of the bedroom, already dressed in a crisp black suit. It was the same one he'd worn the day he walked away from his empire. Now he was walking back in, but he wasn't the same man. She stared at him from across the room, heart caught in her throat. Are you ready? He nodded once. I am. She moved toward him slowly. You're sure you want to do this? Like this? In front of all of them? His answer was quiet but steady. They need to see everything. The real story, not her version. She stopped in front of him, resting her hand on his chest. And if it turns ugly? He covered her hand with his. Then I don't let go of you. She smiled faintly, but it faded just as fast. She's not going to sit there quietly, Jihoon. Your mother won't let you walk into that room and burn her kingdom down. I know, he said. That's why I'm not walking in alone. They left the house at dawn. By mid-morning, they were in Seoul, standing in front of the Kong Group headquarters. A tower of steel and glass that looked less like a building and more like a monument to power. The city buzzed around them, indifferent, unaware. But Jihoon's name was already on the guest list. So was hers. They passed through security with barely a glance. The receptionist's expression flickered as she spotted Haejin, but she didn't say a word. The elevator ride was long and silent, the hum of the machinery matching the low thrum of Jihoon's pulse. When the doors opened, the boardroom was already half full. Men in dark suits, women in tailored jackets, eyes that measured everything, words that weighed more than truth. At the head of the table, seated like a queen in mourning, was his mother. She looked up, and the moment she saw Haejin by his side, her mouth tightened into a thin, precise line. Jihoon, she said coolly. You're late. We're on time, he replied, pulling out a chair for Haejin and sitting beside her. A few murmurs broke the silence. Discomfort rippled through the room like static. The chairman, an older man with tired eyes and a neutral voice, cleared his throat. "We weren't expecting a guest." "She's not a guest," Jihoon said. "She's my wife." "Ex-wife," his mother corrected, not even looking at Haejin. "No," Jihoon said, turning his eyes to her. "My wife." Haejin didn't flinch. She met the woman's gaze, steady and calm. "I didn't come here to argue definitions," she said softly. "I came because someone needs to tell the truth." The room went still. Jihoon stood, opening his briefcase. He pulled out the folders, the documents he'd gathered, one by one. Contracts, surveillance orders, fabricated legal threats. He placed them on the table with the precision of a man lighting a fuse. "This is what's been happening behind closed doors," he said. "This is what my mother has done in the name of protecting our name. Private investigators, harassment, stalking my children, and worse, attempting to remove them from my legal rights as their father." A sharp gasp broke from someone at the end of the table. His mother didn't move. Her voice was ice. "You always did love drama." "No," Jihoon said, stepping forward. "But I love my family more." He turned to the board. "She tried to paint me as weak, as unstable. She told you I was manipulated by a woman who only wanted power. But that woman," he paused, looking at Haejin, "carried my children while I vanished. She built a life from nothing, while you all pretended she didn't exist." He looked around the room, gaze unflinching. "She didn't ask for this. I gave her nothing, and still she raised them with grace, with strength. She protected them from me, because I wasn't strong enough to fight for them before." Now, even some of the board members were shifting uncomfortably. "She isn't the shame of this family," Jihoon said, louder now. "You are." He turned to his mother. "And today, I strip you of the power to keep pretending this family is built on honor, is built on fear, on control, and it ends now." His mother's eyes narrowed. "You think you've won?" Jihoon stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I haven't even started." Then he turned back to the board. "I'm not asking for my position back. I don't want your title. I don't want your name on my son's future. I want the truth on record, because they deserve a world where they don't have to be ashamed of where they came from." Haejin stood beside him, her hand finding his. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, one by one, the members of the board began to rise. Some nodded silently, some lowered their eyes, but none of them defended her. His mother stood slowly, her composure cracking just slightly at the edge of her mouth. "This family will fall apart without me," she said. Jihoon's voice was calm. "Then let it fall." They walked out together, hand in hand. No applause, no congratulations, just silence. And for the first time, it wasn't suffocating. It was clean. Something had ended in that boardroom, and something else had begun. Rain tapped gently against the windshield, blurring the edges of the road ahead. The sky was dimming, not yet night, but heavy with shadow. Jihoon glanced sideways at her. She was staring out the window, her reflection softer than usual. "You're quiet," he said gently. She took a breath before answering. I didn't expect her to just sit there, not fight back, not like she usually does. "She lost before we walked in," Jihoon replied. "She just didn't know it yet." Haejin looked at him. "She looked at me like I was already gone, like I didn't matter, even standing right in front of her." "She looked at you," Jihoon said, "and saw everything she couldn't control. That's what scared her." Haejin didn't respond right away. She watched a raindrop trace its way down the glass. "Do you think she'll stop?" she asked finally. Jihoon hesitated. No, her breath caught. "Then what now?" He tightened his grip on the wheel. "We stop hiding. We make our lives bigger than her reach." They arrived home just as the rain turned to mist. The village looked still, as if it had been holding its breath, too, waiting for them to return. Jihoon stepped out first, scanning the road, the trees, the quiet. No movement, but his guard was still up. He took her hand as they walked up to the house. The porch light flickered on automatically, welcoming them home. Inside, the air was warm. The babysitter greeted them with a soft smile, sensing something had changed. They're asleep, all three, like little rocks. "Thank you," Hagen said softly, pressing a hand to her heart. The sitter left, and the house fell into silence again. Not tense, just thick with everything that hadn't yet been said. Jihoon went to check on the boys while Hagen changed out of her dress. When she returned, he was sitting by the crib, gently stroking one of the baby's cheeks. She leaned in the doorway, watching him. "You didn't hesitate," she whispered. He turned to her. "In there," she continued. "In that room full of power and names and everything you used to be. You didn't hesitate." He stood slowly, crossing the room to her. "I used to think power was something I had to earn," he said. "Now I know it's something I had to give up, to finally find something real." She searched his face. "You don't regret it?" "No," he said, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I regret every second it took me to realize you were more important than all of it." A pause, then a quiet smile from her. But it didn't last long. The next morning, a letter arrived. No stamp, no envelope, just a folded page slipped under their door. Jihoon picked it up while Hagen fed the boys. His name was written across the top in clean, sharp handwriting. Inside, 5 words. "If I fall, you fall." His breath stopped. He looked up, scanning the street. Nothing, just the neighbor sweeping her porch. A cat asleep on the wall. A delivery bike, disappearing around the corner. He closed the door and locked it. Hagen turned as he entered. "What's wrong?" He held out the note silently. She read it. Her face went pale. "Is it her?" "I don't know," he said. "But someone wants us scared again." She folded the paper slowly. "Do you think she knows we recorded the meeting?" Jihoon nodded once. "Probably. Or she suspects." They had recorded the entire boardroom exchange. Not for leverage, but for truth. Jihoon had made that clear from the beginning. It wasn't blackmail. It was testimony. Proof of what had been done in silence for years. "I thought it was over," Hagen whispered. "We stood up. We told the truth. We showed them we weren't hiding anymore." "It's not over," he said. "Not until she disappears. Or I do." She stepped back, eyes filling. "Don't say that." He took her hands. "Then we fight smarter. We go public. Not with documents. Not with secrets. With our story." She shook her head. "You mean, expose our lives? Let the world see our children. Everything." "I mean," he said, voice trembling with conviction. "We take the one thing she can't control, our voices, and we use them." She looked away, chest rising and falling. "This isn't just our life anymore," she said. "It's theirs. And if anything happens to you..." He stepped closer, lifting her chin gently. "Then they'll know their father didn't run." A long silence stretched between them. Then she whispered, "If we do this, we don't do it for revenge." "No," Jihoon said. "We do it so no one else feels as powerless as we did." She nodded slowly, and with that, the decision was made. They would stop whispering in the dark. They would speak, loudly, even if the world wasn't ready to hear it. Even if she came for them again. Because this time, they weren't alone. Jihoon sat on the floor beside the coffee table, his laptop open, screen glowing against the dim room. Hagen curled up on the couch, holding a warm mug between her hands. She hadn't said much since they decided. Her fingers fidgeted with the handle of the cup, her eyes never leaving the screen. He was drafting the first sentence, the first words that would change everything. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, almost as if testing herself. "I do," he replied, his voice calm. "We do." She nodded slowly. "Then let's do it right." Jihoon turned the laptop toward her. "Read it to me." She hesitated. Then softly, her voice filled the room. "My name is Kang Jihoon. Some of you know me as a businessman. Some of you know me as the son of one of the most powerful women in South Korea. But most of you don't know me at all. And I think it's time that changed. Her voice caught. She looked at him. "Keep going," he whispered. "I'm not here to make accusations. I'm here to tell the truth. Not just mine, but the truth of a woman I failed. And the 3 children I almost never knew." She looked up, tears brimming. "Are you sure this is how it should begin?" Jihoon reached out and took her hand. "It begins with us. Always." She nodded, breathing deeply, steadying herself. They worked side by side for the next 3 hours, writing, deleting, writing again. They didn't sugarcoat anything. Not the mistakes, not the abandonment, not the silence. They laid it all bare. The secret marriage, the pressure from the Kang family, the divorce, the pregnancy he never knew about, and the years she spent raising their sons alone. They told the world about the surveillance, the threats, the photos slipped under the door, the powerful mother who tried to erase them. And when they were done, Jihoon recorded the video. He sat in front of the camera, wearing nothing fancy, just a dark sweater and tired eyes. Haejin stood behind the camera, watching silently, her fingers clutching the edge of the table like she needed something to hold on to. He began the same way they wrote it. "My name is Kang Jihoon," he spoke slowly, steadily. There was no anger in his voice, just truth. And by the time he finished, there was no doubt what they had done. They hadn't declared war. They had declared freedom. He uploaded the video just after 2 in the morning. At first, there was only silence. Then the quiet hum of digital life waking up. Likes, shares, comments, messages. Haejin scrolled through them in disbelief. Some were cruel, some were angry, but most were stunned. "I never expected a Kang to speak like this. She raised 3 babies alone? How is she still standing? This is the first time someone with money and power said, 'I was wrong. She's not the stain. She's the story.'" By morning, the video had over 1.2 million views. By afternoon, it had reached international headlines. By evening, someone tried to hack into Jihoon's bank account. He received the alert while feeding one of the boys. "They're retaliating," he said quietly. Haejin didn't flinch. "We knew they would." He nodded. "I just didn't think it'd be this fast." That night, reporters appeared at the edge of the village. Cameras, microphones, vans. Not many, but enough. They didn't knock. Not yet. But they stood outside with telephoto lenses, waiting, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman who had raised 3 children in silence, while the man who loved her disappeared into shame. Jihoon sat beside Haejin in the nursery while she rocked the twins. "They're not going away," she whispered. "No," he said, "but neither are we." She looked at him, something unspoken rising in her chest. "What if this ruins us?" He turned to her. "Then we build something new," he said. "Not for the world. For them." She looked down at the babies. One of them had her nose, the other Jihoon's mouth. The third, asleep in the other room, looked like both of them at once. She kissed the top of the baby's head, her tears falling silently onto the blanket. Jihoon stood and crossed the room. He pulled the curtain back and looked out at the reporters still standing beyond the fence, cameras in hand. "They're going to want to hear from you," he said. She didn't answer for a long moment. Then she looked up, eyes fierce. "Then let them hear my voice." It wasn't just a fallen heir and the woman he left behind. It was love, shame, power, redemption, and everyone wanted to know what came next. Inside the house, the silence was heavier than any noise outside. Haejin stood in the nursery, her hand resting on the side of the crib, watching her sons sleep. They were so still, unaware of the chaos waiting just beyond the gate. Their world, for now, was soft and safe, cradled in warm blankets, lullabies, and the beating hearts of parents who had bled to keep them alive. Jihoon watched her from the doorway. He hadn't said a word in almost an hour. He knew what was coming, and so did she. "They're not leaving," she whispered finally. "Not until they hear from me." "I know," he said gently. She turned, eyes swollen but steady. "They don't want to hear you anymore. You already said everything. They want the woman behind the silence. The one who was left with 3 children and no name. the one who didn't speak for years. He took a step forward. Then let's give them your voice. But once I do, her throat caught. I can't take it back. I wouldn't let you, he said, brushing her hair behind her ear. Not because I want the world to know you, but because you deserve to be heard. She looked down at the floor, breath trembling. What if they twist it? What if they paint me as ungrateful, manipulative, the woman who destroyed the golden boy? They will, Jihoon said. Some will. Then why do it? Because the right people, the ones who've been hurt, left behind, silenced, they'll see themselves in you. And they'll know they're not alone. She looked back at her children, their chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Then she nodded. I'll speak. A few hours later, the interview was set. Not a press conference, not a spectacle, just one journalist, one camera, inside their home, on their terms. It was a woman, early 40s, quiet, sharp eyes, gentle voice. She arrived without a crew, just a single handheld camera and a notebook. She greeted Haejin with a soft bow. I'm not here to exploit you, she said. I just want your story in your own words. Haejin nodded, heart hammering. They set up in the living room. The babies stayed in the nursery, watched over by Jihoon and a trusted neighbor. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for him to watch her. She sat on the edge of the sofa, hands folded in her lap, shoulders pulled back despite the tremble in her breath. The camera light blinked red. And then the journalist asked, Who are you? Haejin stared into the lens. My name is Haejin, she said. I'm a mother, a wife, and for a long time, I was invisible. Her voice cracked. I met Jihoon when we were young, before the suits and the cameras, before the world knew his name. We fell in love quietly, and for a while, that was enough. She paused, blinking hard. Then the world found us. Or maybe it took him from me. His family didn't approve. I wasn't rich. I wasn't polished. I didn't belong. So I became his secret. A tear slipped down her cheek. I loved him anyway. The journalist didn't interrupt. She just nodded, encouraging. I got pregnant just after he left, Haejin continued. He never knew. I never got the chance to tell him. And part of me didn't want to, because I thought if he knew, he'd come back out of guilt, not love. Her hands tightened in her lap. But when the babies were born, something inside me shifted. I stopped waiting for someone to save me. I became who they needed, who I needed. She looked down, then back up again, her voice firmer now. For years, I lived in silence, not because I was ashamed, but because I was trying to protect something that was still too fragile to name. The journalist leaned in slightly. And now, Haejin exhaled. Now I'm not afraid anymore. She looked straight into the camera. I'm not a scandal. I'm not a mistake. I'm not someone who trapped a man with a pregnancy or ruined a legacy. I'm a woman who was left, who built a life, and who now is taking it back. In the hallway, Jihoon's chest tightened. He had heard her speak 1,000 times, but never like this. Never as someone who was no longer surviving, but rising. The journalist asked, What do you want people to understand? Haejin, the ones watching this right now. She thought for a long moment. Then she said softly, I want them to know that silence isn't weakness, that being kind, being quiet, being unseen, doesn't mean you don't have strength. It just means you were waiting for the right moment to speak. The red light blinked off. The room fell into a hush. The journalist stood, bowed again and said, Thank you. That was more than I expected. Haejin smiled faintly. It was more than I thought I had. That night, the interview went live. Within hours, it reached millions. Women wrote in from all over the country, some from across the world. Letters, comments, messages, stories of abandonment, of resilience, of quiet strength rediscovered. And in the center of it all, Haejin sat on the floor of the nursery, 3 babies curled into her sides, and Jihoon behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. You did it, he whispered. No, she whispered back. We did. And just as her eyes closed, a notification popped up on Jihoon's phone. Private message from an unknown sender. He read it again and again. Each time, his heartbeat grew heavier in his chest. Jihoon. Haejin's voice was soft. She leaned against him, her cheek still resting on his shoulder. Is something wrong? He didn't answer right away. She sat up slightly, sensing the shift in his breathing. Jihoon. What is it? He turned the phone toward her. Her eyes scanned the message. Her breath caught. She whispered, It's her, isn't it? Jihoon didn't confirm it. He didn't need to. They both knew. He locked the phone and slipped it into his pocket, standing slowly. I'll check the cameras. Wait, Haejin said, rising with him. You think she'd actually do something? She already has. His voice was low, tight. That message wasn't a warning. It was a promise. They moved through the house quietly. The boys were asleep, unaware of the storm outside their walls. Jihoon checked every door, every window. The security system blinked green. No breach, no movement, just the cold hum of electronics keeping the night at bay. In the kitchen, Jihoon opened his laptop and pulled up the footage from the last 6 hours. Nothing. But then, around 2:43 a.m., a flicker. The gate, a silhouette, standing still just beyond the reach of the floodlights. Watching. They never came closer, never stepped into frame, just watched, and then disappeared. She's testing us, Jihoon murmured. She wants us to feel exposed, unsafe. Haejin wrapped her arms around herself. I thought we took her power away. You can strip someone of their title, he said quietly, but not their obsession. He reached for her hand. We need to leave, just for a few days, somewhere she doesn't know. But the boys, we'll bring them, all of them, you, me, together, just until I find out what else she's planning. She hesitated, then nodded. Where would we go? There's a friend in Busan, Jihoon said. Private house, gated property. I trust him. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's go. They packed in silence. Clothes, diapers, bottles, a few photographs from the wall. It was surreal to gather their life in 2 suitcases like fugitives. But it didn't feel like running. Not anymore. This was protecting. This was surviving again. But this time together. As the sun rose, they loaded the car. Jihoon checked the tires, scanned the road twice, then helped Haejin strap the boys in. The drive was long and winding, down coastal roads and through sleepy towns. The further they got from the city, the more tension seemed to melt from Jihoon's shoulders. Haejin watched him as he drove, one hand gripping the wheel, the other resting on his leg, still taut with alertness. She reached over and touched his knuckles. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For fighting like this. For not letting her scare us into silence again. He glanced at her, eyes soft. You gave me something worth fighting for. She smiled, but it didn't last. At a gas station an hour outside Busan, Jihoon stepped inside to grab supplies. Haejin stayed in the car with the boys. The parking lot was nearly empty. A truck, a family van, an old man sipping coffee on a bench. Then she noticed it, a black sedan. No license plate, just sitting across the street, idling. The windows were tinted, too dark. Her stomach dropped. She reached for her phone and called Jihoon immediately. He answered on the first ring. What's wrong? There's a car, she said, her voice shaking. It's just sitting there, watching. I can feel it. I'm coming out now. Lock the doors. She did. A moment later, Jihoon appeared at the door, his bag forgotten on the ground. He stared across the street, and the moment his eyes locked on the sedan, the engine revved and the car peeled away, disappearing around the corner. Jihoon stood frozen for a moment, then turned back to the car. She's following us. Haejin's hands trembled. He got in and started the engine. We need to get there now. No more stops. The rest of the drive was a blur. By the time they arrived at the safe house, the sky was already darkening again. Clouds hung low, the air thick with salt and something heavier. The property was hidden behind a long driveway and tall trees. Secluded, silent. Jihoon's friend greeted them at the gate. An older man with kind eyes and a military stillness to his movements. "She sent someone," Jihoon said, voice clipped. "We need to stay off the grid." "I'll make sure you're safe," the man replied. "But you need to be prepared. If she's watching you, she's waiting for something." Jihoon glanced at Haejin, then the boys, sleeping in the back. "She's waiting for us to break." They entered the house, locked every door, and waited. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours each night. Haejin noticed the deepening shadows beneath his eyes, the way his jaw clenched when his phone lit up, even with harmless alerts. She sat on the floor near the fireplace, one twin curled against her chest, the other playing with a stuffed bear beside her. Their eldest was asleep in the next room, exhausted after a day of chasing the wind through the back garden. Jihoon entered quietly, crouching beside her. "You need rest," she whispered. "So do you." "I slept," she said. He touched her cheek. "Not enough." A pause. Then he sighed, eyes lowering. "I can't protect you from everything." She looked at him, her voice soft. "You're not supposed to." He shook his head. "But I want to." She leaned into his touch. "You already have. You gave me my voice back. You gave our children their father. That's more protection than I ever dreamed of. But she's still out there," he murmured, guilt lacing every word. "Still waiting, watching. I don't know what her next move is, and that terrifies me." Haejin held his gaze. "Then let her wait, because we're not breaking. Not this time." That night, the rain thickened, hammering against the windows like a warning. Around 2:17 a.m., Jihoon's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He stared at it for 3 long rings before answering. "Hello?" Pause. Then his mother's voice. "I warned you." He didn't speak. "I told you, Jihoon. If I fall, you fall with me. You think your video changes anything? You humiliated your bloodline. You dragged this family into the dirt. You did that all by yourself," he said coldly. "I made you," she hissed. "Without me, you are nothing." He almost laughed. "Then why are you so afraid of me now?" Silence. Then her voice softened something.